6 months had passed since the Krell ships left Earth. The electromagnetic fields had disappeared within hours of their departure. The world had collectively exhaled, then promptly lost its mind celebrating. Athletes who had participated in the bluff became instant celebrities. Governments awarded medals. Universities offered honorary degrees. Children dressed as Olympians for Halloween, but for Taiyan, Guan, Minji, Doyon, Yuna, and Yunji. The celebration was brief. Vexther's condition had been clear. If the Krell were to withdraw, they wanted to understand humanity better. They wanted ambassadors. Specifically, they wanted the athletes who had demonstrated what humanity was capable of. The Olympic Village in Seoul had been transformed into Earth's first alien embassy complex. The buildings had been modified to accommodate Krell physiology, higher ceilings, reinforced floors, different atmospheric controls in designated areas. It was surreal walking through what had been training facilities and seeing 3-meter-tall aliens studying human equipment with genuine curiosity. Gay-won had taken to her role as cultural ambassador. With the same intensity she brought to Taekwondo, she spent her mornings teaching Krell visitors about human martial arts philosophy, the concept of respect for opponents, discipline through practice. The Krell struggled with the idea that combat could be art, that fighting could build character rather than just establish dominance. You strike, but you pull the blow before impact. A young Krell warrior named Kesh observed during a demonstration. He was smaller than most Krell, what they would consider adolescent. Why? In real combat, you would aim to damage. Because we're not in real combat, Jiwon explained. We're training. My partner is helping me improve. Why would I hurt someone who's helping me? Kesh's amber eyes flickered with confusion. Your species is strange. You have no idea, Jiwon replied with a smile. Across the complex, Doyon stood at an archery range with 3 Krell students. They were fascinated by the boa weapon that required no energy source, no advanced technology, just physics and skill. One of them, a female Krell named Tira, had taken to it surprisingly well, despite her 4 arms, making the mechanics awkward. Eh? You say this is ancient weapon? Tira asked, drawing the bowstring with 2 hands while stabilizing with the other 2. Thousands of years old, Do-yoon confirmed. Humans used bows before we had written language. Now we use them for sport. We turned weapons into games, Tira observed. All your combat sports. Fighting without killing. Weapons without death. Is this how you manage your violent nature? Doyon considered this. Maybe. Or maybe we just love competing. We need to test ourselves against others. Sports give us a way to do that without actually hurting each other. Mostly. Tira released her arrow. It hit the target slightly off-center. She made a frustrated clicking sound. Again. Yuna had perhaps the strangest assignment. She took Krell on long-distance runs. This was torture for them at first. Their biology simply wasn't built for it. But some persevered, fascinated by the meditative state humans could achieve during long runs. A Krell named Breck had become her regular running partner. He could only manage 5 kilometers before needing rest, but he came back every day. Why do you do this? Breck asked during one of their runs. His breathing labored. This pain. For no purpose. It has purpose, Yuna said. Her breathing was controlled, easy. I'm proving to myself that I can. Yesterday, I ran this distance in 40 minutes. Today I want to run it in 39. Tomorrow, maybe 38. Always improving. Always challenging. Never satisfied. That's the idea. Breck stopped running, his forelegs trembling. You know what the council says about your species? They call you the ones who race themselves. They mean it as insult. But I think it is compliment. On another part of the complex, Mingi taught table tennis to a group of Krell who found the sport absolutely baffling. The ball was tiny, the movements required precision they had never developed, and the scoring system made no sense to them. But they kept trying, and Minji found their frustration endearing. Eung split her time between judo demonstrations and something unexpected she had started teaching conflict. Resolution techniques. The Krell had never considered that combat training could teach de-escalation. The idea that learning to fight made you less likely to fight seemed paradoxical to them. Meanwhile, back on the Krell homeworld, something unprecedented was happening. Young Krell had started questioning their culture's obsession with strength hierarchy. They had watched footage from Earth, seen humans of all ages and abilities participating in sports, celebrating improvement rather than just victory. Some young Krell wanted that for themselves. Vexler found himself at the center of what amounted to a cultural revolution. He had returned to the homeworld as the commander who avoided a costly war. But instead of being criticized, he was being celebrated as the one who discovered humanity. Now he was fielding requests from Krell youth who wanted to start improvement training programs. They wanted to learn sports, to compete in ways that didn't determine social standing, to challenge themselves voluntarily. The Krell High Command was divided. Conservative members saw this as weakness. Progressive members saw it as evolution. The debate raged for months until Vexler made a bold proposal: the Galactic Games, an Olympic-style competition between humanity and the species within the Krell Empire. Not for conquest, not for dominance, but for mutual understanding and cultural exchange. Sport as diplomacy. The proposal traveled through channels for weeks. Earth's governments debated endlessly. Could humanity compete against aliens with fundamentally different biology? Would this be humiliating? Dangerous? Exploitative? But the athletes themselves had no doubts. When asked, Taeyang's response was simple: "We'll compete against anyone." "That's what we do." The vote came back positive. The first Galactic Games would be held in 3 years. Earth would host. Planning began immediately. A new generation of athletes began training with this goal in mind. Hye-in Kim was 16 years old, a gymnast with Olympic potential even before the alien contact. Now she trained with an additional purpose: she would be among the first humans. To compete in the Galactic Games, she trained in the Sol Complex, often with Krell observers watching. They were fascinated by gymnastics, by movements that seemed to defy their world's gravity. Hye-in found their attention motivating. She pushed herself harder. Knowing she was representing humanity to beings from other worlds, an exhibition event was organized as a test run. Small scale, just a few sports. Humans and Krell competing together in Sol. The event was chaos and confusion, and absolutely beautiful. Krell athletes discovered they were naturally gifted at throwing events. Their strength made shot put and hammer throw almost comical. They shattered distance records without effort. But they struggled with anything requiring sustained movement or precision. Human athletes dominated running events, especially distance. Swimming was human exclusive since Krell were denser than water and sank. But they excelled at rowing with their multiple arms, providing obvious advantages. Table tennis became surprisingly popular with Krell despite their initial struggles. Something about the rapid-fire nature appealed to their combat instincts. Wrestling took on new dimensions when four-armed opponents were involved. The exhibition ended with a closing ceremony that saw humans and Krell athletes exchanging gifts and contact information. Friendships formed across species barriers. One Krell athlete tried human food and immediately regretted if their digestive systems were not compatible. A human athlete attempted to lift Krell training equipment and pulled a muscle. Language barriers created comedy. A Krell tried to give a human a traditional greeting by gripping their head with all four hands. Accidentally. Squeezing too hard. A human tried to high-five a Krell and couldn't reach high enough. Through translators and gestures and mutual laughter, they communicated. After the exhibition, Vexler approached Yuan privately. They had developed a mutual respect over the months. The alien commander and the Taekwondo champion who had started everything. "I need to confess something," Vexler said. "I knew you were bluffing." Guan stared at him. "What? Halfway through your first demonstration?" The precision was too consistent. Real combat has chaos. Your movements were practiced, perfected through repetition, not battle-tested. You were performers, not warriors. "Then why did you?" "Because by then, I had seen enough," Vexler interrupted. "Any species that perfects itself through voluntary challenge. that turns combat into art, that runs 40 kilometers for entertainment, that species would never truly be conquered. You could be beaten in battle, but you would never be broken. The war would never end. Juan absorbed this, so the whole thing was pointless? We could have just told you the truth. No, the bluff was necessary. It gave my council justification to withdraw. If you had simply shown us your sports, we might have thought you weak. The bluff demonstrated that you could deceive us, could think strategically, could organize under pressure. Those are warrior traits. Just not the way we expected. I don't know whether to be insulted or complimented. Be neither. Be what you are, a human who seeks challenge because the challenge exists. As months turned into years, the preparations for the Galactic Games intensified. Other species heard about the event. They reached the stadium and formed ranks on the field where Taiyang had run that morning. The alien ships hung above them, close enough now that he could see details in their hull, panels and ports and strange geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. A beam of light shot down from the central ship. It was pale blue and seemed solid, like a column of illuminated water. The beam touched the ground in front of Juan. The warrior elite will board for assessment. The voice of Commander Vexter boomed from the ship. Resistance will be interpreted as hostility. Giwan took a breath and stepped into the beam. The light surrounded her, and she began to rise. One by one, the others followed. Taiyang's turn came, and he stepped forward. The beam felt like being submerged in thick liquid. Pressure surrounded him, then he was lifting off the ground, rising toward the ship. The journey up felt eternal. Paris spread out below him, a city gone dark except for fires and emergency lights. Then he was inside the ship, deposited in an enormous hangar bay, with metallic walls that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. The Krell waited for them. They were massive, easily 3 meters tall, with armored bodies that looked like a fusion of insect and reptile. 4 arms, 2 legs, heads that were angular and covered in sensory ridges. Their eyes glowed with a dull amber light. There were dozens of them, all armed with weapons that crackled with energy. At the center stood one that was clearly in command, larger than the others, with markings etched into its armor. "I am Commander Vexter," it said. Its mouth didn't move, the words coming from a device on its chest. "You are the warrior elite of Earth?" Guan stepped forward. She somehow managed to look confident despite being less than half Vexter's height. "We are the Forward Combat Assessment Unit. We're authorized to demonstrate Earth's basic warrior training capabilities." Taiyang marveled at her audacity. Basic training. As if what they were about to show was the minimum standard, Vexter tilted his head. Demonstrate. They were led to what appeared to be a training facility within the ship. A vast room with equipment that looked vaguely similar to exercise machines, but sized for beings much larger than humans. Targets lined one wall. Open space dominated the center. Doyon went first. He had his bow, his quiver of arrows. He stood at one end of the room and fired at targets 70 meters away. Each arrow struck dead center. Then he fired while walking. Then while jumping, his accuracy never wavered. The Krell watched in silence, their weapons lowered but ready. Yunji and several other judoka demonstrated throws using each other. They made it look effortless, bodies flying through the air, perfect control on the landings. Then Youngji asked for one of the Krell to volunteer. After a long pause, one stepped forward. It outweighed Yunji by at least 200 kilograms. She asked it to grab her. It did, all 4 arms. She executed a hip throw that sent the massive alien crashing to the floor. The Krell stirred. Their weapons came up slightly. Vexter raised one hand, and they relaxed. G1 performed taekwondo forms, her kicks snapping out with whip-crack speed. She shattered practiced dummies with strikes that would have broken human bones. The gymnasts performed routines that defied gravity, flipping and twisting in ways that made the Krell visibly uncomfortable. Then Taiyang ran. A simple sprint across the length of the training room. The Krell had sensors. He could see them tracking his movement. He hit his top speed, the same speed that had won him gold. To him, it was just running. To the Krell, who were built for strength and power rather than speed, it must have looked impossible. Yuna joined him, and they ran laps around the room. 5 kilometers. Then 10. The Krell grew restless. Their own warriors tired quickly, built for short, devastating engagements. Watching humans run without apparent fatigue for over an hour clearly disturbed them. After 2 hours of demonstrations, Vexter called a halt. How many warriors of this caliber does Earth possess? This was the critical moment. Mingy had been chosen to answer because she looked young and harmless. She stepped forward, her translator device in hand. These athletes represent our recreational selection program. Citizens who train for sport and competition. Our actual military specialists number in the millions. It was technically true, sort of. If you counted every soldier and every military on Earth, and ignored that most of them were regular humans with regular training, Vexter's amber eyes fixed on Minji. Recreational? We compete for honor, Minji said. To see who is fastest, strongest, most skilled. Our military programs are more intensive. Taiyang watched Vexta process this. The alien commander turned to his officers, and they communicated in their own language, series of clicks and harmonics that the translators couldn't interpret. The conversation lasted several minutes. Finally, Vexter turned back. You will return to your commanders. We will reconvene in 48 of your hours for formal negotiations. We must reassess our intelligence. The relief was overwhelming. They were escorted back to the hangar, back into the gravitational beam. As Taiyang descended toward Paris, he could see the other athletes' faces. They had done it. They had bought time, but as his feet touched the stadium ground, and he looked up at the ships still hovering overhead, Juan's whisper echoed in his mind. They believed us. But what happens when they discover the truth? 48 hours felt like 48 seconds. Around the world, real military forces finally managed to coordinate outside the electromagnetic dead zones. Tanks rolled toward Paris. Fighter jets circled at the edge of the interference field. Naval vessels positioned themselves along coastlines. But everyone knew the truth. If the Krell decided to attack, Earth's militaries would be fighting with technology centuries behind the aliens. Inside the Olympic Village, Mahajan Park worked frantically. He was a Korean intelligence officer who had been in Paris on a routine security assignment. Now he found himself coordinating the biggest deception in human history. His temporary command center was a storage room filled with paper maps, battery-powered radios, and desperate people. They're sending scouts, a French liaison reported, breathless from running. Multiple ships launched smaller craft 2 hours ago. They're surveying population centers. Hagen felt his chest tighten. Where? Everywhere. London, New York, Tokyo, Mumbai, Seoul. The liaison paused. They're observing civilian areas, not just military bases. That was bad. Very bad. If the Krell saw regular people going about normal activities, the entire bluff would collapse. Unless, get word out through any means possible, Hagen ordered. Radio runners, anything. Every gym, every fitness center, every sports facility in the affected cities needs to increase visible activity. Make it look like physical training is normal for everyone. It was a desperate measure, but desperation was all they had, in Seoul. One of the Krell scout teams landed near Gangnam District. 3 aliens emerged from their small craft, weapons ready, scanning devices active. They had been ordered to observe human population centers discreetly. To verify the claims about military strength, they found a commercial gym. Through the large glass windows, the Krell scouts watched humans engaging in various physical activities. A middle-aged man in business, clothes was lifting what their scanners identified as 140 kilograms on something called a dead. A teenage girl performed pull-ups with additional weight attached to her waist. An elderly woman practiced slow, controlled movements that demonstrated remarkable balance and body control. The lead scout recorded everything. These were not young warriors. These were civilians of varying ages, yet all displayed physical capabilities beyond what the Krell considered normal. The scouts moved through the city, observing a park where humans ran in groups, a school where children performed gymnastics, a martial arts studio where people of all ages practiced combat techniques. Their report was dire. Even non-military population demonstrates enhanced physical baseline. Recommend extreme caution. Aboard the command ship, Vexter reviewed the scout reports from every surveyed city. The pattern was consistent. Humans everywhere engaged in physical training. Not just the young warriors they had seen at the Olympics, but people of all ages. He turned to his xenobiologist, a Krell named Sana, who specialized in studying conquered species. Explain this, Vexter demanded. Sana manipulated holographic displays, showing human physiology data. They are unusual, Commander. Most species we have encountered optimize for either strength or speed, never both. Humans possess moderate strength, impressive speed for their size. And she paused, highlighting several data points. Extraordinary endurance capacity. Endurance? Vexter's second in command, a warrior named Thok, sounded dismissive. We crush enemies with power, not persistence, Sana said carefully. But our engagements are brief. Maximum force, quick victory. Human biology suggests they evolved for extended physical activity. Their cooling system alone is remarkable. They can maintain exertion for hours without overheating. Vexter studied the data. His species came from a high-gravity world where explosive power was essential for survival. They were sprinters, not marathon runners. A prolonged ground war against enemies who could fight for hours without rest was a nightmare scenario. We need more information, Vexter decided. I want to see their armed combat specialists. Not these recreational athletes, but actual military warriors. The demand was transmitted to Earth. Hagen received it with mounting dread. They didn't have time to fake an entire military demonstration. But they did have Olympic combat sport athletes, boxers, judokas, wrestlers. Martial artists, and they had one advantage that Krell didn't expect. Humans loved a good show. 12 hours later, another group boarded the Krell ship. Juan led them again, but this time she was joined by Yunji, heavyweight boxers, wrestlers from 6 countries, and a Brazilian fighter who competed in mixed martial arts. They had rehearsed, had planned every moment to maximize intimidation while minimizing actual danger. The arena Vexter prepared was serious. A circular platform 30 meters in diameter, surrounded by Krell observers. 5 of your warriors against 5 of mine, Vexter announced. Non-lethal engagement. We wish to assess comparative combat capability. The human fighters exchanged glances. This was it. The moment where the bluff might end in their deaths. Guan, Yunji, a Russian boxer named Victor, the Brazilian fighter named Lucas, and an American wrestler named Marcus faced 5 Krell warriors. The aliens were massive, their forearms giving them obvious advantages in grappling. Their armored carapaces would make striking difficult. The match began with a gesture from Vexter. The Krell moved with surprising speed. But their attacks were straightforward, relying on strength and reach. Guan used her taekwondo training to stay mobile, her kicks targeting joints and gaps in the armor. She couldn't hurt them, but she could frustrate them. Eung got grabbed by 2 of the Krell's forearms. Instead of fighting the grip, she used the leverage to execute a sacrifice throw, taking the massive alien down with her. They crashed to the platform hard enough to dent it. Victor boxed defensively, slipping inside the reach of the Krell's longer arms, landing body shots that weren't powerful enough to damage, but demonstrated precision. Lucas grappled with one Krell, his Brazilian jiu-jitsu training finding submission angles that the alien's extra limbs couldn't defend against. Marcus, the wrestler, simply refused to go down. A Krell picked him up and slammed him to the platform 3 times. Each time, Marcus got back up, his expression never changing. On the 4th attempt, Marcus somehow reversed the position, briefly taking the Krells back before being thrown off. The match lasted 20 minutes. The humans lost, of course. The Krell were stronger, had more endurance than expected, and their armor absorbed most attacks. But what unnerved the alien observers was how long the humans lasted. How they adapted mid-fight. How they smiled sometimes, like they were enjoying it. After the match, as the humans were treated for minor injuries, a Krell warrior approached Vexther. "Commander, fighting them felt wrong. They showed no fear, no survival instinct. They fought like it was a game." That was exactly what worried Vexther. While the humans recovered, his intelligence division presented their latest findings. They had been analyzing Earth's digital networks, trying to understand human military capability. What they found terrified them. Video footage labeled as military. A training showed humans jumping from aircraft, engaging in prolonged firefights, surviving explosions, operating in extreme environments. The Krell analysts didn't realize they were watching heavily edited recruitment videos, action movies, and video game footage. They thought it was documentary evidence. One video showed a human leaping between buildings. Another showed someone dodging gunfire in slow motion. A third displayed soldiers operating for days without sleep in a desert environment. To the Krell, who took everything at face value, it painted a picture of an enemy far more dangerous than they had anticipated. "There must be tiers," Santa suggested at the emergency council Vexther called. "The Olympic athletes are standard warriors. These special forces we see in the footage are elite, and there may be even more advanced soldiers we haven't encountered." Thok slammed a fist on the table. "We cannot show weakness. The Empire has never retreated. The Empire has also never been reckless," Vexther countered. "We conquer worlds we can hold. A prolonged war with an enemy that matches our strength while vastly outnumbering us is suicide." The debate raged for hours. Attack and accept heavy casualties. Negotiate subjugation but risk human resistance. Or withdraw and admit failure. An analyst interrupted with new data. "Commander, we found references to something called the Marathon. It appears to be a ritual combat endurance test. Humans regularly run over 40 kilometers. Thousands of them. 4. Recreation." The room fell silent. Sana pulled up the data. 42.2 kilometers? In just over 2 hours for elite performers, but thousands of average humans complete it regularly. Vexther stared at the numbers. His own warriors could sprint for short distances, but tired quickly in extended engagements. If humans could maintain combat readiness while covering 40 kilometers, any ground war would be a grinding nightmare. "Show me," he demanded. They played footage of marathons. Rivers of humans running together, cheering each other on, pushing through obvious pain to finish. Children ran shorter distances. Elderly humans completed the full course. It wasn't military training, it was mass participation sport. Vexther made a decision. He would have the humans demonstrate this marathon in person. If it was genuine, if their entire species possessed this endurance capacity, then invasion was impossible. The casualties would destroy his fleet. But something else bothered him. In all the footage, all the observations, humans seemed to seek out challenges. They made themselves suffer voluntarily. They competed constantly. What kind of species optimized itself for hardship when no survival pressure demanded it? He needed answers. And he needed them before he committed his forces to a war they might not survive. Vexther couldn't sleep. His species didn't sleep the way humans did, but they required rest periods. He couldn't rest. The data on marathons consumed him. His xenobiologist, Sana, had prepared a full briefing on human endurance capability, and every detail made invasions seem more impossible. "They are persistent predators," Sana explained to the gathered command staff, displaying holographic models of human anatomy. On their world, their ancestors would chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. No other species on their planet could match this ability. She highlighted their cooling system. They sweat. Liquid evaporates from their skin, regulating temperature efficiently. They can run in heat that would kill most species. Their bipedal gait is energy efficient. Their respiratory system processes oxygen optimally during extended exertion. Doc remained skeptical. "This is biology. Our weapons don't care about biology." "Your weapons require soldiers to use them," Santa replied. "Our warriors are built for explosive strength. A battle lasting 30 minutes leaves them exhausted. Human warriors can fight for hours, days. They literally evolved to outlast opponents. Vexler studied the data on human military history. Wars that lasted years. Soldiers who marched hundreds of kilometers, then fought, then marched again. Sieges that stretched for months. Battles in frozen wastelands, scorching deserts, dense jungles, every environment imaginable. And humans adapted to all of them. "I want proof," he said finally. "Have them demonstrate this marathon. In person." Under our observation, the message was transmitted to Earth. Hagen received it with mixed emotions. On one hand, this was another chance to sell the bluff. On the other, running a marathon wasn't exactly intimidating. It was just running. But Yunahan understood immediately. "They're testing our endurance," she said. "If we can show them that running 42 kilometers is normal for us, routine even, they'll realize ground warfare is suicide for them. Can we fake that?" Hajan asked. Yuna smiled grimly. "We don't have to. Thousands of people run marathons regularly. We just need to organize one and make it look military." Within 18 hours, they had organized what might be the strangest marathon in human history. The course looped through Paris, carefully plotted to remain visible to Krell sensors. Olympic distance runners like Yuna would lead the pack, demonstrating elite performance. But behind them would come hundreds of amateur runners, volunteers who were willing to run a marathon under alien observation to save humanity. They spread the word. Dress in anything that looks tactical. Run in formation when possible. Show no weakness. The day of the demonstration arrived with gray clouds overhead. Thousands of runners gathered at the starting line near the Eiffel Tower. Krell ships repositioned to observe the entire course. Vexter himself descended in a smaller craft. Taking position at the finish line with his command staff, Taiyang stood with Yuna at the front. He wasn't a distance runner. Sprinters and marathoners were completely different athletes, but he would run anyway. They all would. Giwan Mingi Yunji, Doyan, every athlete who had participated in the bluff so far. They would show the Krell what humans did for fun. The starting signal fired. The runners surged forward. Yuna and the elite marathoners immediately established a brutal pace. Vexter's sensors tracked them at 2 hours, 5 minutes, and 0 seconds. Marathon pace averaging just under 3 minutes per kilometer. They made it look effortless, their breathing controlled, their form perfect. The Krell watched in silence as these humans ran at speeds that would wind a Krell warrior in minutes, and maintained it kilometer after kilometer. But what truly unnerved the Krell observers was everyone behind the elite runners. Thousands of humans of all ages running the full distance. Some ran in groups, talking and laughing. Elderly humans with gray hair ran slowly but steadily. Teenagers raced each other. Parents ran while pushing small children in wheeled carriers. Santa monitored everything with growing concern. "Commander, this isn't military training. This is recreational activity. Mass participation." At the halfway point, Yuna showed no signs of fatigue. Neither did the other elite runners. At 30 kilometers, they actually increased their pace. Taiyang struggled behind them. Sprinting was his sport. Not this grinding endurance, but he kept moving. His legs burned. His lungs ached, but he would not stop. Around him, hundreds of other runners pushed through their own pain. The Krell couldn't understand it. Why suffer voluntarily? Why push the body to its limits when no survival need demanded it? In their culture, physical training was about combat readiness, about preparing for war. This looked like mass suffering as entertainment. At 40 kilometers, Yuna began her finishing kick. She accelerated, her legs pumping faster, pulling away from the other elite runners. She crossed the finish line in 2 hours, 5 minutes, and 17 seconds. The Krell sensors confirmed she had run 42.195 kilometers at an average pace of under 3 minutes per kilometer, and had accelerated at the end. She stopped running, bent over with hands on knees, breathing hard but controlled. After 2 minutes, she stood upright, smiled, and waved at the Krell craft hovering nearby. Behind her, the other runners came in waves. Elite athletes in the 2-hour range. Good runners in the 3-hour range. Average runners in 4 hours, slower runners taking 5, 6 hours to finish, but they all finished. Thousands of them. Humans who had volunteered to run a marathon under alien observation to prove a point. Small. Children ran a 5-kilometer version of the course. Elderly runners completed half marathons. Disabled athletes finished in wheeled chairs, their arms providing the propulsion their legs couldn't. Every runner got cheered by spectators who had come out despite the alien occupation. Vexther landed his craft near the finish line. He approached Una directly. "This is standard for your species." Una nodded, still catching her breath. Cities all over Earth host marathon races. Hundreds of them, every year. Millions of people participate. "It's popular. Popular," Vexther repeated. The word didn't translate well. "You do this for enjoyment?" "For challenge," Una said. "To see what we're capable of. To push our limits." Sana approached Vexther, her voice urgent even through the translator. "Commander, I need to present my full findings. Immediately." They returned to the ship. In a private command room, Sana displayed everything she had learned about human evolutionary biology. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans were apex endurance specialists. On their world, they could outlast any other species over distance. That trait had carried into their civilization. Any ground war with humanity would be catastrophic, Sana concluded. They don't just have soldiers. Their entire species is evolutionarily optimized for prolonged conflict. They won't break. They won't tire. They'll keep fighting until either they win or they're all dead. His empire had conquered 47 worlds. They specialized in overwhelming force and quick subjugation. Species either surrendered fast or were destroyed from orbit. Humanity didn't fit either category. They were strong enough to resist, numerous enough to sustain losses, and stubborn enough to never quit. Commander Thok said carefully, "Perhaps we could negotiate terms. Subjugation without invasion? Tribute and cooperation instead of conquest." Before Vexther could respond, there was an alert. A human was requesting direct communication, not through official channels, but a personal request to speak with Vexther alone. It was Taiyang, against his officer's advice. Vexther agreed. The sprinter was brought aboard and led to a small meeting room. No guards, no weapons. Just the two of them. Taiyang looked exhausted from the marathon, his legs still trembling. But his eyes were clear and determined. "I need to tell you the truth," he said. Vexther tilted his head. "Speak!" "We're not soldiers," Taiyang said. "We're athletes. Everything you've seen, the Olympics, the demonstrations, the marathon, that sport, competition, we do it for honor, for glory, for the achievement. Not for military training." Vexther went very still. "You lied." "We bluffed," Taiyang corrected. "You were going to destroy our world. We bought time the only way we could, and your military is weak." "I didn't say that." Taiyang pulled up footage on a tablet that had been specially shielded to work inside the ship. He showed actual military training. Soldiers running obstacle courses, weapons training, combat exercises. It was impressive, but not superhuman. Our soldiers are selected from our general population. Then they're trained extensively beyond what you've seen. They're strong, they're skilled, and yes, they can fight for extended periods. He showed more footage. Military operations. Real ones, not Hollywood productions. They showed humans fighting in difficult conditions, adapting to challenges, maintaining operations for weeks or months. "But here's what you need to understand," Taiyang continued. "Those athletes you saw, they're civilians. Regular people who choose to push themselves to incredible levels. That's what humans do. We seek out challenges. We make ourselves better even when we don't have to. Our entire species is like this." Pulled up historical data. "We've fought wars that lasted years, decades. We don't give up. Ever. Not because we're programmed for war, but because we're stubborn and proud and we don't know when to quit." Vexther studied Taiyang's face. "You came here to confess this, why?" "Because you're going to figure it out eventually," Taiyang said. And when you do, you might think we're weak. We're not. We're just different. You're built for overwhelming force. We're built for endurance. Neither of us wants to find out which strategy wins. The two sat in silence for a long moment. Then Vexler did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a strange sound, clicking and harmonic. Your species trains for war by pretending it's play. You perfect yourselves with no survival pressure demanding it. You run 40 kilometers for fun. Vexler shook his head. Perhaps we are the weak ones. We need threats to drive us. You drive yourselves, so what happens now? Tai Young asked. Vexler considered carefully. I will recommend withdrawal to our high command. The casualties would be unacceptable, but I have a condition. 6 months had passed since the Krell ships left Earth. The electromagnetic fields had disappeared within hours of their departure. The world had collectively exhaled, then promptly lost its mind celebrating. Athletes who had participated in the bluff became instant celebrities. Governments awarded medals. Universities offered honorary degrees. Children dressed as Olympians for Halloween, but for Taeyang, Giwan, Minji, Doyeon, Yuna, and Yunji, the celebration was brief. Vexler's condition had been clear. If the Krell were to withdraw, they wanted to understand humanity better. They wanted ambassadors. Specifically, they wanted the athletes who had demonstrated what humanity was capable of. The Olympic Village in Seoul had been transformed into Earth's first alien embassy complex. The buildings had been modified to accommodate Krell physiology's higher ceilings. Reinforced floors, different atmospheric controls in designated areas. It was surreal walking through what had been. Training facilities and seeing 3 MIT-ARTL aliens studying human equipment with genuine curiosity. Juan had taken to her role as cultural ambassador. With the same intensity she brought to Taekwondo, she spent her mornings teaching Krell visitors about human martial arts philosophy, the concept of respect for opponents, discipline through practice. The Krell struggled with the idea that combat could be art, that fighting could build character rather than just establish dominance. Strike. But you pull the blow before impact, a young Krell warrior named Kesh observed during a demonstration. He was smaller than most Krell, what they would consider adolescent. Why? In real combat, you would aim to damage. Because we're not in real combat, Guan explained. We're training. My partner is helping me improve. Why would I hurt someone who's helping me? Kesh's amber eyes flickered with confusion. Your species is strange. You have no idea, Juan replied with a smile. Across the complex, Duan stood at an archery range with 3 Krell students. They were fascinated by the Bauer weapon that required no energy source, no advanced technology, just physics and skill. One of them, a female Krell named Tira, had taken to it surprisingly well despite her forearms making the mechanics awkward. You say this is ancient weapon? Tira asked, drawing the bowstring with 2 hands while stabilizing with the other 2. Thousands of years old, Doyon confirmed. Humans used bows before we had written language. Now we use them for sport. You turned weapons into games, Tira observed. All your combat sports? Fighting without killing. Weapons without death. Is this how you manage your violent nature? Doyon considered this. Maybe. Or maybe we just love competing. We need to test ourselves against others. Sports give us a way to do that without actually hurting each other, mostly. Tira released her arrow. It hit the target slightly off-center. She made a frustrated clicking sound. Again,